Griffin, please don't touch that, Jonah Hayes whispered, gripping his 5-year-old son's tiny hand as the boy's fingers reached for a row of brightly colored gummy vitamins near the pharmacy counter. Griffin pouted, but they're dinosaur ones, Dad. I know, bud, but we came for your inhaler refill, not candy. It was already past 6 in the evening, and Jonah's nerves were frayed. Between rushing straight from his construction shift to picking up Griffin from his neighbors, and then racing to the only open pharmacy in town, he hadn't had time to eat, let alone breathe. His flannel shirt was stained from drywall dust, his jeans dirt smudged at the knees, and he was painfully aware of the stares from the people behind him in line. He reached into his wallet, counting bills. Not enough. He'd have to put the cereal and toothpaste back. He sighed, bending down to speak to Griffin. Okay, G-Man, we're just getting your inhaler today, all right? We'll get the rest later. Hey, watch it, a woman's voice snapped as Jonah turned around too quickly and bumped hard into someone behind him, nearly knocking her purse to the ground. Oh. Jonah's face flushed. I'm so sorry, ma'am, didn't see you there. The woman blinked, stunned, brushing her long chestnut hair behind her ear. She looked entirely out of place in the grimy corner of the pharmacy, a crisp ivory coat, sleek heels, a subtle gold necklace resting against her collarbone. She was beautiful, not in the way of movie stars, but in a way that made Jonah forget what day it was. It's fine, she said quickly, kneeling to steady Griffin, who had stumbled in the shuffle. You okay, little guy? Griffin nodded, then pointed at her with wide eyes. You smell like cookies. She laughed, a soft, genuine sound. That's a first. Jonah gave her an apologetic smile. He's got no filter. I really am sorry, we're just having one of those days. She looked at him a moment longer, then tilted her head. Looks like it. The pharmacist called his name. Mr. Hayes, it's ready. Jonah stepped forward, pulling out his cash. The total made his stomach drop. He was short by $8. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Can you take the cereal and the toothpaste off? Before the pharmacist could respond, the woman stepped up beside him. Actually, I'll cover it. Jonah snapped his head toward her. No, I can't let you do that. She shrugged like it was nothing. It's not a big deal. It is to me. Well, maybe don't make it one, she said, already handing over her card before he could argue. Consider it a thank you for introducing me to dinosaur vitamins. He stared at her, confused and speechless, as the card reader beeped and the bag was handed to him. Thank you, he said, his voice low with sincerity. Really? She smiled. I'm Dakota Zeller, by the way. Jonah Hayes, and this is Griffin. Hi, Griffin said, clutching the inhaler bag like it was treasure. Dakota gave him a warm smile. Nice to meet you both. Jonah hesitated. Look, I don't want to seem ungrateful, but I'd really like to pay you back. Maybe I could. Buy me a coffee sometime, she offered, her eyes twinkling. He blinked. What? Coffee, I'm downtown most mornings. Maybe we could grab one. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I'd like that. Great, she said, scribbling something on his receipt. That's the name of the cafe. I'm there around 8. She turned and walked out, heels clicking against the tile. Griffin tugged at his sleeve. Dad, are you gonna marry her? Jonah let out a breathless laugh. I don't think it works that fast, buddy. But part of him already knew. He was going to see her again. And he was going to fall for her. The next morning, Jonah stood outside the glass doors of a cafe that looked too upscale for someone wearing worn jeans and a flannel shirt. He'd even tried to comb his hair for once, which Griffin had insisted on helping with. Inside, Dakota sat at a corner table, a laptop open in front of her, sipping from a white porcelain mug like she belonged to another world. He almost turned around and walked away. But then she looked up and smiled. Hey, you came. He stepped inside, gripping his wallet like it might fly away. Said I would. Order whatever you want, she said. It's on me. Nope, he said, shaking his head. I'm here to pay you back. She leaned back. I was hoping you'd come for more than that. Jonah swallowed. I'm not smooth or polished, and I don't exactly have a lot of free time between Griffin and work. Dakota closed her laptop. I like coffee, I like kids, I like men who don't pretend to be something they're not. He looked at her, unsure how someone like her could sit here, smiling at someone like him. They talked for an hour. About Griffin, about her love for architecture, about how he'd been a carpenter before taking on construction, about her favorite book and his favorite diner, and how they both hated olives on pizza. By the time he stood to leave, she looked up at him like she didn't want him to. I'll walk you out, she said. On the sidewalk, she paused. Want to do this again? He nodded. Yeah, I do. Then, before he could overthink it, he added, would you maybe want to come to Griffin's soccer game this weekend? It's nothing fancy. Just some kids running into each other. Her eyes lit up. I'd love to. As he walked away, he didn't see the man in the black suit step out of the town car, parked a block away. Miss Zeller, the man called after her, catching up. Your father's meeting's been moved. Should I let the jet crew know you'll be late? She glanced back at Jonah's retreating figure. Yeah, she said softly. Tell them I'll be late. The sun was already low over the field when Dakota climbed out of the backseat of the sleek black sedan. She dismissed the driver with a quick nod and stepped onto the grass, heels in hand, bare feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. She'd swapped her usual tailored coat for a navy sweater and jeans, her hair tied up in a loose twist, not that anyone here would recognize her from the financial magazines. Whistles blew as a group of children darted across the field, tiny cleats kicking up dust. She scanned the sidelines until she spotted Jonah, crouched beside Griffin, adjusting the boy's shin guards. His shirt clung to his back, damp from the late afternoon heat, and his baseball cap shaded his eyes as he smiled at something Griffin said. Dakota walked toward them, her steps light. You made it, Jonah said, standing as she approached. His voice held a flicker of disbelief, like he hadn't really expected she would come. I said I would, she replied. Besides, I wanted to see what all the hype was about. Griffin's been talking about this game like it's the Super Bowl. Griffin beamed up at her. I'm starting today. I wouldn't miss it for the world, she said, crouching to bump her fist gently against his. As the game kicked off, Jonah and Dakota stood side by side on the edge of the field. Parents around them shouted encouragements, some pacing, others sipping from plastic coffee lids. Dakota folded her arms loosely, watching Griffin chase the ball with wild enthusiasm, even if he tripped twice in the first 10 minutes. He's got heart, she said, smiling. He definitely didn't get his coordination from me, Jonah laughed, but he never quits. They stood in companionable silence for a while, the occasional cheer or groan rising from the crowd. Then Dakota tilted her head toward him. So you work construction? Yeah, he nodded. Mostly renovation jobs lately. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills at least most of them. Do you like it? He took a moment before answering. I like building things, seeing something go from broken to solid again. There's something honest about it, you know. She nodded slowly. I do. He glanced at her. You said you're into architecture. I run a design firm, she said carefully. Jonah raised an eyebrow. Like interior stuff. More like full-scale development, commercial buildings, city planning, that sort of thing. Wow, he said, impressed. That's serious. It keeps me busy. And here I had you pegged for a dentist, he teased. She laughed. I hate the sound of drills. A loud whistle pulled their attention back to the field, where Griffin had just scored, though from the look of it, he might have kicked the ball off a teammate by accident. Still, he threw his arms in the air like he'd just won the championship. Jonah clapped loudly, pride written all over his face. "That's my kid." "Victory by chaos," Dakota said, grinning. After the game, they walked Griffin to the car. His cheeks were flushed, his jersey grass stained, and he was still riding high from his goal. "Did you see me?" he asked Dakota as he buckled into the back seat. "You were amazing. I think you scared the other team." Griffin giggled, kicking his cleats off. Dakota lingered near the open door. "Thanks for inviting me." "I'm glad you came," Jonah said. She hesitated. "I'm flying out tomorrow, just for a few days. Conference in Zurich." Jonah blinked. "Zurich, as in Switzerland." "Yes," she paused, watching his reaction. "I'll be back by the weekend." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I've never even been on a plane." "You should," she said, "sometime." He looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You and come from very different worlds." "We're standing in the same one right now." He didn't answer, and she didn't push. Instead, she leaned in, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'll text you when I'm back," she said. "Okay." As she walked away, Jonah climbed into the driver's seat and glanced into the rearview mirror. "She's nice," Griffin said from the back, mouth full of orange slices. "Yeah," Jonah said, starting the engine. "She is." 3 days later, Dakota stepped into her office on the top floor of the Zeller Holdings building. Glass walls, white marble floors, and a panoramic view of the skyline surrounded her. Her assistant trailed behind her, reading off meeting times and investor calls, but Dakota barely heard. She dropped her travel bag by the couch and walked to her desk, opening her laptop. A familiar message blinked in her inbox. Subject: Site Proposal, Eastboro Community Center. She clicked it open, scanning the attached files. A budget request, a list of contractors, and a name she hadn't expected to see: Hayes Construction. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She hadn't told anyone about Jonah. Their worlds weren't supposed to intersect like this. But there it was in black and white. She picked up the phone. "Get me a meeting with the Eastboro project lead," she said. "Today." Across town, Jonah sat in the break room of a half-gutted rec center, wiping sweat from his brow. His boss had mentioned a surprise meeting with the funding partner, some bigwig from the top floor. He had no idea that the woman stepping out of an elevator across the city was about to change everything. Again. The conference room smelled faintly of plaster dust and fresh paint, a sharp contrast to the polished mahogany table that had been wheeled in for the meeting. Jonah stood near the window, arms crossed over his chest, the sleeves of his shirt pushed up to his elbows. His crew had cleared out early, leaving him to represent Hayes Construction alone. He had expected a consultant, maybe someone in a stiff blazer with a checklist, or, at most, a junior partner halfway through a real estate license. He hadn't expected her. Dakota stepped through the door with a folder tucked under one arm. Her gaze swept the room once before landing on him. She didn't falter, didn't blink, just walked to the table and set the folder down like she'd done it 1,000 times. Jonah didn't move. "You're the project lead." "No," she said, opening the folder. "I'm the owner." His jaw tightened. "You didn't think to mention that." "I didn't think we'd be standing in the same rec center 3 days after a soccer game," she said evenly. He let out a breath, slow and sharp. "So what was this? A research trip? You slum it with the locals to keep your investors entertained." Her eyes narrowed. "Is that really what you think of me?" "I don't know what to think," he said, pacing 2 steps away from her. "You flew out of the country without saying what you actually do. You show up in town like you just happened to stumble into a pharmacy, And now, find out you're the one writing the checks on a project I've been trying to land for months. I didn't plan any of that. But you knew who I was. I knew your name and that you had a son with asthma, she said. I didn't know you were bidding on this center until I saw your company's name in a proposal file. Had no idea you'd even be in the room today. He looked at her, his jaw set. You should have told me who you were. Dakota held his gaze, and you would have treated me the same. His silence was louder than any answer. She stepped back from the table, folding her arms. I didn't lie to you, Jonah. Just didn't hand you my resume over coffee. I build things for a living, he said, and I can't build anything if I don't know what I'm working with. Dakota's voice softened. Then maybe you should ask instead of assuming you already know. A long silence stretched between them. Outside the window, the sound of a jackhammer echoed from a nearby street. Jonah finally turned away, staring at the chipped tile near the door. I've never felt like someone could just walk into my life and make everything shift, he said. But then you did, and now I don't even know which part of that was real. She stepped closer. All of it was every second. He faced her again, slower this time. You've got more money than I'll probably ever see in my lifetime. You fly to Europe like it's a grocery run. Can't even take Griffin to the dentist without juggling bills. I'm not asking you to be anything but who you are. I don't fit in your world. I'm not asking you to. You're standing in a building you own, overseeing a project that pays my bills. I'm not here to control you, Jonah. I'm here because I believe in this place, in what you're doing. And maybe, just maybe, I believed in you a little too. The door creaked open behind them, and a young site coordinator poked her head in. MS, Zeller, the engineers are ready for you down in the basement. Dakota nodded without taking her eyes off Jonah. I'll be there in a minute. The woman disappeared. Dakota turned back to Jonah. I'm not going to apologize for having money, but I will apologize for not telling you sooner. That wasn't about you. That was about me not knowing how to be seen without the filter of my last name. He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. You're not the only one who doesn't know how to be seen. Dakota nodded, then walked past him toward the door. Just before stepping out, she paused. There's a community gala this Friday. It's for the center. I'll be there, if you want to talk. No suits, no contracts, just two people figuring out who they are. She didn't wait for a reply. Jonah stood in the quiet conference room long after she'd gone, his thoughts spiraling. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on a bridge he didn't know how to cross, one built with steel and glass and expectation. That night, as he tucked Griffin into bed, the boy looked up at him with sleepy eyes. Is she coming back? Jonah brushed a curl off the boy's forehead. I don't know. Griffin yawned. I liked her. Me too, Jonah said softly. The next day, he found the invitation tucked inside a folder left behind at the site. Embossed paper, gold trim, the kind of thing you didn't get unless you belonged. He stared at it for a long time before folding it in half and sliding it into his back pocket. Later that week, Jonah stood in front of a mirror in his neighbor's hallway, while Griffin played with a toy truck on the floor. Does this look stupid? He asked, adjusting the collar of the only blazer he owned. Mrs. Yates, the retired nurse who babysat Griffin when Jonah worked late, squinted at him over her glasses. You look like you're about to sell me a used car, but in a good way. He laughed, thanks, I think. Don't let her money scare you, Jonah. You've got something most people spend their lives chasing heart. You show up. That matters more than any zero on a bank statement. He nodded, tying his shoes with careful precision. As he stepped into the night, the city lights felt different, not brighter, just waiting. And somewhere across town, Dakota stood under a canopy of white lights, wondering if the man she'd fallen for would walk through the door. She didn't know yet that he was already on his way. The ballroom shimmered with warm light as Jonah stepped inside, his boots muffled by the rich carpet underfoot. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and citrus, and soft music floated from a string quartet in the corner. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks overhead, their reflections glinting off the marble floor. He paused at the threshold, taking in the sea of dark suits and floor-length gowns. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne flutes nestled in silver. Jonah declined with a quick shake of the head, adjusting the collar of his blazer. He hadn't known how to dress for a place like this. But Mrs. Yates had pressed his shirt, Griffin had given him a thumbs up, and he decided that was enough. He caught sight of Dakota near the stage at the far end of the room. She wore a midnight blue dress that shimmered slightly when she moved, her hair pinned up, a delicate pair of earrings catching the light. She was speaking with a group of donors, her posture composed, her smile gracious. He hesitated. Then she turned. Her expression shifted the moment she saw him. A radiant kind of relief washed over her features, and she excused herself without breaking eye contact, crossing the room with quiet urgency. "You came," she said, stopping just in front of him. "You invited me." "I wasn't sure if you would." "I wasn't either," he admitted. "But I figured if Griffin could survive a soccer game with his shoelaces tied together, I could survive a few hours in a room full of people who probably buy buildings for fun." Dakota gave a soft laugh. "You're not wrong." "How's the fundraising going?" he asked, glancing toward the stage. "We passed our goal tonight," she said. "The center's getting an expansion. A new gym, a reading room, even a kitchen for community meals." "That's incredible," Jonah said. "You made that happen." She shook her head. "We did." He looked at her, brow furrowed. "Dakota, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "That night at the pharmacy, was that some kind of test to see how I'd react?" "No," she said immediately. "It wasn't planned. I was having a rough day. I needed to get out of the city, clear my head. Didn't expect to meet someone who'd flip my world upside down." "You didn't look like someone having a bad day." "I've had a decade of practice making it look like I'm fine." Jonah nodded slowly. "You said you didn't want people to see you through your last name." "I still don't." He stepped a little closer. "Then tell me something no one else knows." She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "I was supposed to take over the international division this year," she said quietly, "but told the board I wasn't ready. They didn't like that. My father didn't either." "Why not?" "Because in his world, saying no is weakness. But I wasn't willing to lose myself just to keep up an empire." Jonah studied her. "You don't seem lost to me." "I was," she said, "until I sat on that cold pharmacy floor next to a 5-year-old who told me smelled like cookies." He laughed under his breath. "He's good at breaking down walls." "So are you." They stood in stillness for a beat, the music swelling around them. Then Dakota glanced toward the stage. "There's going to be a short speech. They asked me to say a few words." "Want me to wait here?" "No," she said. "I want you right by me." Minutes later, under the soft glow of the chandeliers, Dakota stepped up to the podium with Jonah standing quietly just behind the curtain. The crowd hushed as she took the microphone, her voice clear and calm. "When I first decided to fund this project, I thought I was just building a facility. But I've learned that buildings are nothing without the people inside them. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you meet someone who reminds you what it means to build something real, not with steel or stone, but with intention, with heart, with love." She glanced subtly to the side, meeting Jonah's eyes. "I want to thank the families who inspired this, and the man who reminded me that the best things in life can't be bought." A few people clapped, then more. The applause grew and Dakota stepped down, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright. Jonah waited until she reached him. That was something. Did I say too much? He shook his head. You said exactly what needed to be said. Later, when the music picked up and couples flowed onto the dance floor, Dakota led him by the hand. He hesitated only once. I haven't danced in years. Neither have I, she said. We'll be terrible together. He let her guide him, his hand settling at her waist, hers resting at his shoulder. They swayed slowly, clumsily at first, then with an ease neither expected. He watched her, her eyes soft, her expression open in a way he hadn't seen before. I've never felt like this, he said quietly. Like I'm standing in a place I don't belong, but somehow you make it feel like I do. You belong, she said, with me. He paused. This is real. She nodded, as real as it gets. I'm not rich, Dakota. I may never be. I have enough for both of us, she said, but that's not what matters. He looked down at her. Then what does? That you stayed when it got complicated, that you showed up when it mattered, and that you love my messy, complicated world enough to step into it. He exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders, his hand tightening at her back. Then let's build something, he said, together. The next morning, Dakota stood barefoot in Jonah's kitchen, wearing one of his flannels over her dress from the night before, stirring coffee while Griffin sat at the table eating cereal. Jonah leaned against the doorway, watching them. Everything was quiet except for the clink of the spoon and Griffin's soft humming. Dakota looked up with a sleepy smile. This is better than any ballroom. I was just thinking the same thing. She walked over, handed him the mug, then kissed him on the cheek. You still owe me for those vitamins, she whispered. He pulled her in closer. I think I've paid in full. She tilted her head. Not yet. He kissed her, slow and certain, as Griffin giggled behind them. You grown-up stuff. Dakota laughed, resting her forehead against Jonah's. So what now? He asked. Now, she said, we figure out how to build a forever. And this time, they both knew exactly where to start. Jonah stood in front of the old tool shed behind his house, the morning sun casting long shadows over the gravel path. A tangled mess of wood scraps and rusted hinges lay at his feet, and the smell of sawdust clung to the air. Are you sure this is what you want to do on your day off? Dakota asked, stepping out onto the porch, shielding her eyes against the light. She wore a soft chambray shirt rolled at the sleeves and jeans that had clearly never seen a construction site before this week. Jonah looked up, running a hand through his hair. I've been meaning to fix this thing since before Griffin was born. Figured today's as good a day as any. She walked toward him, careful not to step on a crooked nail. You know, I could have sent a crew out here in an hour. I know, he said, smiling faintly as he passed her a second-hand hammer. But then I'd have missed the chance to teach you how to square a frame. She took the tool, examining it like it might bite. You're really committing to this whole normal weekend thing. He reached for a plank, holding it steady. It's not normal, it's ours. She leveled her gaze at him, something soft settling in her expression. You're not what I expected. Let me guess, he said, balancing the board. You thought I'd be the kind of guy who needed saving. I thought you might resent me. For what? For having more than you. Jonah paused, then set the plank down. I don't care about the money. I care that you didn't treat me like I was less because I didn't have it. Dakota leaned against the shed door, arms crossed. People usually do, even when they pretend they aren't. You didn't. You showed up to a soccer game and sat in grass like it was a red carpet. I wanted to be where you were. He stepped closer, wiping his hands on his jeans. You still do. I'm standing in a pile of nails wearing shoes, can't return because they're covered in paint. What do you think? He laughed, the sound genuine and deep. You're something else, Zeller. She tilted her head. So what happens now? We go back to real life. This is real life, just with better coffee and fewer broken floorboards. She stepped into him then, rising onto her toes, her hands slipping around his waist as she kissed him without hesitation. When she pulled back, her voice was quiet. Move in with me. He blinked. What? I mean it. I've been rattling around that penthouse like a ghost. You and Griffin, you're what home feels like. And besides, Griffin already claimed the guest room as his adventure base. Jonah laughed under his breath. You sure you want a 5-year-old and a man who tracks mud across marble floors living with you? I'd trade every glass wall and imported rug for you. He touched her face, fingers brushing her cheek. Then yeah, we'll move in. Behind them, Griffin's voice rang out from the back door. Dad, Dakota, I made pancakes, but I dropped one on the dog. Jonah turned, sighing, but Dakota was already laughing. I'll handle it, she said, heading toward the house. You keep building the shed. I'll keep Griffin from feeding breakfast to the neighbor's Great Dane. Deal, Jonah called after her. Over the next few weeks, their lives folded together like puzzle pieces that had always belonged. Mornings began with pancakes and spilled juice, afternoons with Dakota taking video calls in yoga pants, while Jonah sketched blueprints for a new project, one sponsored by Zeller Holdings, but built entirely by Hayes Construction. Evenings were filled with blanket forts, bedtime stories, and the occasional impromptu dance party in the living room. Jonah never asked for anything extravagant, but Dakota still found ways to spoil him. She surprised him with a brand new toolkit engraved with his initials. He countered by building her a reading nook overlooking the skyline, complete with a hidden drawer where she found a handwritten note that said, "You're my blueprint." They didn't need grand declarations anymore. Their love was 1,000 quiet choices made every day. One rainy Sunday, they curled up on the couch while Griffin played with blocks on the floor. Thunder rolled in the distance, and the city lights glowed through the windows. I've been thinking, Jonah said, his voice low. Dangerous, Dakota teased, nudging him. I want to marry you. She looked up, startled. Are you proposing to me while wearing sweatpants? He grinned. I was going to do it at that fancy gala next month. But then I realized I don't want to wait. This is the life I want. Right here, rain and sweatpants and you. She stared at him, heart racing. Yes. You didn't even let me finish. I don't care, she whispered. Yes. He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple, elegant, a single stone set in a rose gold band. She took it without hesitation, slipping it on her finger as Griffin looked up from the floor. Does this mean I get another mom? He asked. Dakota knelt beside him. Only if you want one. He nodded solemnly. As long as you still make pancakes. Deal. The wedding took place in the courtyard of the newly renovated community center. Griffin served as best man, wearing a tiny tux and holding the rings with solemn pride. Jonah wore a tailored suit, and Dakota walked down the aisle in a dress she designed herself, a soft ivory silhouette with lace that mirrored the beams of the shed Jonah had rebuilt. They exchanged vows under an arch decorated with wildflowers, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and the very people their love had brought together. After the ceremony, as guests laughed and music played, Jonah pulled Dakota aside, away from the crowd. Remember when you said buildings are nothing without the people inside them? She nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. You're the only foundation ever needed. She kissed him, and the world faded into warmth. Years later, Hayes and Zeller Designs became one of the most respected development firms in the region, known not for their luxury, but for their heart. They built schools, libraries, shelters, and parks, places where love could grow. Jonah and Dakota raised Griffin in a home where laughter came easy and love was never questioned. They had arguments, late nights, paint-splattered walls, and burnt toast. But they never stopped choosing each other. And every Friday evening, without fail, they sat on their rooftop, her head on his shoulder, his hand in hers, watching the city they built together.